Hello and welcome to the Inside Social Work podcast, a podcast that aims to inspire, engage and connect social workers with other social workers and allied health professionals doing interesting and amazing things across the world. I'm your host, Marie Vakakis. Thank you for listening and I hope you enjoyed today's podcast episode. Hello, this is a bit of an announcement. This is the second last episode of the Inside Social Work podcast in its current format. I've been working behind the scenes on rebranding and repositioning my skills and expertise into something a little different. This was a change after 4 years of running the podcast that I felt was time to make. The new podcast, you'll be happy to hear, will still be on this link, so you'll be able to find it really easy, and it's going to be called This Complex Life. It's still focusing on mental health and relationships and everything in between, but more of a focus on what we can do as individuals or what we can do for those in our lives that we care about, for friends, for family, what parents can do for themselves, for their children. So it's really bringing together all the things that I've learned over the last few years, my experience as a therapist, as an accredited mental health social worker and family therapist, and bringing that in and bundling that up into something a little more digestible for folk to be able to access. So have a listen, see what you like. It might be some things that you can use in your work with clients or even for yourself. So on that note, I'll keep playing the current episode and I look forward to having you all follow me on this journey. Thanks so much so far. It's been amazing. Hello and welcome back. In today's episode, I'm chatting with Liz Marillis-Goff, and Liz is an accredited mental health social worker who runs her own private practice called Breathe Therapy. She's a mindful trauma therapist and is really passionate about supporting women to heal from childhood and adult experiences of interpersonal violence and abuse. Liz has done some really incredible work, and we talk about some of her social work journey and how she incorporates various techniques such as ACT, DBT, and mindfulness into working with women to recover from some of those experiences and diagnoses such as PTSD, anxiety, OCD, and other sorts of things that can really stem from those early experiences that women face. I hope you enjoy this episode with Liz. Hello and welcome to another episode of the Inside Social Work podcast. Today I've got Elizabeth Marillis-Goff, or Liz, joining me on the show. Welcome, Liz.
Hi, thanks for having me.
So nice to be chatting to you. I love that online stuff can bring us together on different parts of Australia.
Absolutely.
Can you tell me a bit about yourself, who you are, what you're doing, and what's been your journey so far into social work?
Yeah, absolutely. So at the moment, currently, I have my own private practice called Breathe Therapy. And that name will make more sense a bit later on as we keep chatting. So I'm based in the Lower Hunter, which is not far from Newcastle in New South Wales. And I predominantly do a lot of victim services work. So in New South Wales, we have a scheme for victims of crime. So I do see a lot of, majority of my clients are adults, but also some children who've experienced family and domestic violence and sexual assault, and also child abuse. So in terms of my journey into social work, I've always been really passionate about social justice, even from a young age. And just kind of, throughout my schooling journey, I started studying. I can't remember what it's called. In year 12, I did what's it called? Society and culture, something like that, like a sociology kind of subject for year 12, which I absolutely loved. And so, when I was picking what uni degree to do, it seemed an obvious choice. I went straight in from school. Was pretty green, but definitely was a steep learning curve.
I really love hearing people's different journeys. So it's really nice to hear that social justice and having exposure to a subject in high school that could funnel you into social work. Like, how awesome is that?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, really, really cool.
So you went straight into social work. How
Yeah.
did you kind of end in private practice and in therapy? So are you an accredited mental health social worker, or do you have other sorts of modalities that you've kind of added on top of that?
Yeah, so yes, I've got my accreditation as well. I guess I. It's funny, when I was at uni, I always wanted to work um, in child protection, and I did a prac, one of my early, I think it might have been my first prac in child protection, and I pretty quickly was like, this is not for me. um, so even though I had that strong ideal around protecting children, certainly that type of work, yeah, and the high risk and enormous caseloads, and yeah, I just knew that was not for me at all. So then I pretty quickly started, I guess, sort of looking in other areas, and that's when I really started getting drawn more to kind of counselling and those kinds of things. And then, yeah, so I guess career wise, I've just kind of always ended up in roles, like it was sort of a little bit, it would just kind of, I ended up in those roles. Like I worked sort of for family support services and things like that. And I was always in some case management type roles, but would always gravitate towards more of that kind of a therapy role. So that's when I really started, yeah, doing some applying for those positions, more counselling sort of positions, and then getting additional training. CBT Act and all those kinds of things, and DBT. So, yeah, and it's kind of that combination of um, a bit of luck around, where, things that would sort of land in your lap. Like I was part of this fantastic project at a local family support service, where we were actually running a DBT program for free, which just doesn't exist. It exists through a health service, but it's, I think it's got a 2-year wait list, and so it's incredibly hard to get into. So it's not funded anymore, but for a while there, we were able to provide that. So that meant that I was able to get the training and have incredible supervision and support in that DBT program. So yeah, just different things like that. But I guess my most recent kind of couple of roles, I worked at the sexual assault service in health for about the 5 years prior to starting my practice 2 years ago, 18 months ago. And yeah, that's where I probably feel like um, the, I guess my skill set in terms of, yeah, working with trauma really um, grew, and that passion, yeah, really grew while I was working there. So yeah.
It was actually, I'm glad you mentioned your interest for trauma, because I was going to just unpack the DBT on a few episodes prior. We had a DBT trainer and specialist sort of talk about DBT, and that it's often used for complex trauma and negative life experiences. It's often associated with borderline personality disorder, but not necessarily. Tell me about how you've integrated that. You've talked about, we've talked off radio. Oh, my goodness. We've talked, corresponded around sort of your mindfulness work. Like, how do you combine all of this? So you sort of talk about being a mindful trauma therapist.
Yeah.
What is that? What do you kind of bring into it? And then
Yeah.
how do all these things kind of connect?
Yeah. Yeah. I know. And I do feel like I think most of us do work a bit eclectically, and pick and choose the bits we like. So I guess for me, so mindfulness is, so DBT is broken into 4 components, and one of the components is mindfulness. And that was probably where I was first really exposed. I had previously been exposed to it as well, but um, yeah, I guess that was where it kind of deepened my understanding of mindfulness. And then I guess sort of personally, I was also starting to really explore yoga and meditation for my own kind of health and well-being as well. And I guess so. It's that kind of combination of, that my noticing the personal benefit and the growth that I've had from that, and also seeing the benefit for my clients. So so in terms of being the mindful trauma therapist, I guess obviously my focus is really on trauma, and I'm mindful as a therapist, and also teaching mindfulness as a really core skill in treating trauma. I think the skills in DBT are really helpful because um, I guess the reason I'm really big on mindfulness, and I think 90% of my clients walk through the door, and when I say that word, they're like, "Oh, mindfulness, tried it once, didn't work, don't like it, I'm not doing that breathing thing."
It's so true.
Yeah, and I'm like, I know, I've heard it, I know. But it's so varied, and so I always say to people, we're going to try 100 different things, and I promise that something's going to work for you. And so but it's really about helping people to there's the two parts of it that I love. The first is that really non-judgmental stance. So people who've experienced trauma are obviously much more likely to have a really harsh inner critic, and have a lot of self-blame and shame and really negative core beliefs. And so just by introducing that non-judgmental element, noticing that, pain in your side at the moment, and not judging it as bad, just sitting with it and noticing it without a judgment. That's really hard for these people. It's hard for all of us, but we get better with practice. And also that then kind of helps them to start to utilize that in other areas of their life. And also it's about really increasing awareness. So even in providing psychoed around the impacts of trauma. Like I even just had a client this afternoon, and she was saying that she had an event that happened over the weekend, which sent her right back into that fight flight state. She was really hyper vigilant. She went to work. She said, I was just really on edge. She said, but I knew exactly what it was this time. I knew that this was this old response. It wasn't, she said in the past that would have just absolutely unraveled me. But just knowing that this is what's happening to me. And then she was able to practice some of those grounding things, which she said, oh, it was really hard. She said, but I kept trying. I said, yeah, but you stayed through your whole shift, and you didn't have a panic attack, and all those kinds of things. So, so it's just increasing that awareness is so helpful as well.
It is. It's such a helpful strategy, and I think people underestimate the helpfulness of mindfulness. Like it's across so many different modalities. You mentioned ACT before, DBT. I mean, all of them, because you can't notice if you're not aware. Otherwise, you're avoiding, you're numbing, you're distracting.
Absolutely.
It's so important.
Absolutely.
You've got a special interest in working with women to heal from childhood trauma, and how those adult experiences can, of interpersonal violence and abuse. And you just mentioned an example of someone sort of being triggered by old memories and old responses. What are some of the impacts of those experiences on women's health, mental health, physical health, relationships? I mean, that's a huge question.
Yeah,
But how do
yeah,
we kind of see that showing up?
yeah. It's the impacts are huge. They're so enormous. So some obvious ones are obviously like PTSD and complex PTSD, and I would say probably 90% of my clients are exhibiting symptoms of those, as well as a range of kind of anxiety disorders, whether that's generalized anxiety, OCD, those kinds of things, some depression, much higher risk of suicide, and self-harm. And also things like I mentioned, like panic attacks, lower self-esteem and self-worth, and shame is a really big one. Um, they're also, in terms of physical health, I mean, they're much more likely to sort of have like immune health problems, gastrointestinal problems, so like irritable bowel syndrome, things like that. Just a whole range of different health difficulties that arise. Um, and they're also more likely to be further re-victimized. And so that's another reason why I'm really passionate about educating women and supporting them in that healing journey, because without having an understanding of what happens in their bodies physiologically, um, I'll give an example. So, for example, if you're raised in a home where your parents are arguing all the time and there's violence in the home, um, on a physiological level, even though your heart might be racing and there's some of those fight flight responses start to happen, or even some numbing and those kinds of things, there's an element of it, even though you don't like it, that becomes a bit normal for you. And so you're much more likely to then go into a violent relationship as an adult, because even though there's elements of the relationship, particularly the violence that they don't like, there's also sort of a familiarity to it. And so in helping women to really unpack and understand the impacts of what they've been through, and understand their body responses, they have all these light bulb moments, and then they're much more able to understand what a safe relationship feels like, and how to create that safety.
As you were saying about that light bulb moment, one of my clients came into mind. Literally, we did this psychoeducation, and she's seeing someone new, and she had that moment. She woke up in the middle of the night being distressed, but realized through our conversations the distress came from nothing being wrong, that her body was so used to that fight or flight response that stable or calm felt uncomfortable. It
Yes.
felt she wasn't dysregulated, but it just felt odd, and having
Yes.
to coach her through stable, healthy, secure relationships, attachment. No, it doesn't have to be an explosive fight and then massive apologies. It's not these big highs and lows. And then how to find excitement and connection and spontaneity in that safety, and not find it boring, but still find
Yes.
healthy ways. And it's so true that all of these things, it's just so important.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. Absolutely.
And I'm mentally checking off all those things you mentioned. Like, yeah, I can see it in people, the gastrointestinal issues, if your body's always
Yes.
in that cortisol arousal, you're going to have immune issues, getting sick
Yes.
more often, more
Yes.
fatigue.
Yes.
Your body is processing all that cortisol and adrenaline. So then it gets kind of into the slump. Like there's such
Yeah.
it's the biopsychosocial model. And I think people
Yes.
forget that it all interacts.
Yes. Absolutely. Absolutely.
Um, yeah. I mean, you've talked a little bit around the physical side, and you mentioned sort of, PTSD, anxiety, OCD, depression. What what are the challenges of living with those mental health challenges or mental illnesses, like day to day?
Mm.
What are people struggling with? What does it make it hard to do?
Yeah. One of the things I find really interesting is so many of the women I work with have lived with these symptoms for years and years and years.
Oh, those you can't see us, but I'm just shaking my head and nodding. It's so true, like decades.
Yes, decades. Yeah. And they convince themselves that this is some kind of normal, or not even that they convince themselves it's normal, but I guess there's just a tolerance around, I'm just on edge all the time and I don't sleep well. And, if I do particular things, I panic, or, Yeah, or even I've got a few clients who are socially phobic. So, I just don't go to the shops ever. I just do all my shopping online. And that's just how it's been for years and years. And the thought of having to go to a shopping center sends them into a panic. Um, so, I mean, people are incredibly resourceful and resilient. But I guess they usually come to therapy at some point because, yes, something has kind of yeah, come up that they feel like, okay, this is having an impact. And for a lot of people, it's when they have children. So for some of the women I work with, they might have just had a baby, and then, the thought of, if they were, say, sexually assaulted by a family member, the thought of that family member having anything to do with that child sends them into such a panic that they realize, I need to deal with this. Or it might even be that their children are a bit older. So people will come to me and say, my daughter's the age that I was when my sexual abuse started. And I realize this is my stuff I need to deal with. So things like that. But I do find that it's often about, or a few mums have brought their kids. They said, I want you to see my kids. And I say, okay, come in for an initial session so we can talk about what's going on. And then in the process of unpacking that, they've grown up in DV and that family violence and all of that, I sort of say to them, and have you got support? And they just kind of look at me and they're like, oh my gosh, and hadn't realized the impact it had had on them as well, because they've just been so busy keeping on, especially if they've kind of, had to really leave in a crisis mode and those kinds of things. So, yeah, I feel like I've lost track of the question now, but
No, you've answered it
oh,
perfectly
okay.
because, and I think you really highlighted something with the parenting, that some people tolerate stuff for themselves, but they wouldn't accept it for someone they care about. So there's that, you mentioned earlier that there's that shame and that negative, harsh critic, but people would never say out loud, we'd hope, to someone they love the things they say to themselves. So
Yes.
seeking support for your kid, for some people, it's like, yeah, it's a no-brainer. And it's like, well, what about yourself? And then there's that, ah.
Yes.
And as you were talking about, women holding on to this for years and the pain and the discomfort, I had to hold back tears because I can see, I've worked with people like that who they're like, yeah, but this has been happening for 20 years, 30 years. And they didn't know, like, they just kind of acclimatized, some acclimatized to the weight of that, the toll that takes on their energy, on their life. Like, things just, they forgot what it felt like to be light.
Yes.
And to experience joy and pleasure, like it was, just survival for so many. And that's huge, because that's all the stuff that gets taken away when someone experiences that kind of violence and abuse.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely.
So you're working with, with mostly, women with trauma. You're hearing these difficult stories. You're looking at, helping them maybe do some parenting skills, heal themselves while also preventing some of this stuff in their children. Like, that's quite a lot. Like, how do you hold that passion but protect yourself from that burnout and vicarious trauma, especially being someone who, social justice has been your thing since you were younger? Like, that's hard to be that engaged in that area.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's a great question, because I think it's something that it's like one of those topics that gets talked about a lot, but also kind of minimized a bit as well, I think. So one thing I do really want to highlight is the impacts of um, not being supported within an organizational sense, which was one of the factors that led me to move into private practice. And is similar for quite a few of my colleagues that I talk to as well, in private practice. So I guess yeah, I just wanted to highlight that even organisations can have policies around this stuff, but yeah, it's important to have mechanisms in place to be, to support yourself outside of that. I think for me, it's kind of twofold. So there's obviously the obvious things around taking care of myself, having clear boundaries, and I guess I'm really starting to even get really specific with those boundaries. So sometimes like there was a phase where I was just kind of accepting, like people would ring up and like I was just kind of accepting whatever referrals came through. And now I'm being a little bit more discerning around, actually, I've got a really heavy caseload of kids who are all going through court and there's a lot going on. So actually, no, another child going through court I'm not actually able to hold that at the moment. So trying to get really, really clear around those things. And also boundaries around my time. So trying to, and this is a work in progress, but trying to structure time in my work calendar for, for the admin tasks and for the
Oh,
letters and
admin.
for the, yes, I know. But there's just always bits and pieces, the odd email, following things up, the support letter. There's just always those bits and pieces. And for a while there, I just had this running to-do list and it felt like I was only adding to it and never crossing things off. So actually blocking out the time to do the things on the list. Yeah, but also I guess in terms of that self-care stuff, again, I'm kind of really learning the importance, like this stuff's hard, like the self-care stuff's hard. It's easy enough to say, oh yeah, exercise and drink water and do the things, but um, I'm also a mum of two young kids. So I've got a lot of commitments outside of work as well. And so sometimes self-care is actually like making myself get out of bed earlier than, what I really want to make sure that I do some of those things to take care of myself. But certainly, yeah, meditation and yoga are a big part of what, and journaling are big parts of what helps me stay connected to me and what's really important. And I guess again, going back to that kind of real awareness of, hang on, I'm really on edge lately and feeling like a bit of a headless chook, and what needs to give here, or what's taking up, what's kind of creating this level of energy in me, and trying to adapt from there. So yeah.
That sounds like that mindfulness thing you were talking about, of
Yeah.
actually checking in and seeing, where am I at? What's my body telling me? And then putting in place some things that can be supportive of reducing that physical distress or the mental clutter,
Yes,
instead of
yes.
just squishing it down, squishing it down, squishing it down, and then burning out.
Yes, yes.
Oh, that
But
sounds
it's
so hard.
yeah, it is hard. It is hard. Absolutely. And that's what I always say, that, to my clients too. I'm like, this work's really hard. Looking after yourselves really hard. Because we think that the thing, oh, I'm just going to have a glass of wine and chill on the lounge. We think in the moment that indulgent is going to make us feel relaxed and better. But actually, the next morning when you wake up and you feel a bit off because the wine
Had 2 glasses or 3.
2 glasses feel a bit off, and you slept in and now you're running late and you actually were meant to do something last night, that's not self-care. That's not looking after you. So yeah, being
And
mindful of that.
and that's such an important message to the audience listening, because everybody shares very similar things. Like there's a big overlap in what people find helpful, and it's doing that with intentionality. So
Yes.
and I know for us in Melbourne, went through really long lockdowns. It was, keeping up some of that stuff was really hard, but actually recognizing my work, preparing for my day has to happen before I stick my bum on the chair. It's
Yes.
preparing maybe my meal from the night before, having a think about what to do for breakfast, setting my alarm enough to go for a walk or have a stretch or have a shower. Like, actually, we all make mistakes and we all get scrambled sometimes, but
Yes, of course.
I think when you're working with that kind of complexity, we need to really take care of ourselves, because it's really draining work, like
Yeah.
emotionally quite fatiguing and demanding. And
Yeah,
um,
absolutely. Absolutely.
I'm sure you've had that time where there are some clients, that you can't book anyone else after them, or you need an
Mm.
hour break because that dysregulation has an impact on us.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And also, of course, really like the obvious things like having really good supervision. And I'm also, you know, starting some sort of peer supervision type groups, those kinds of things. So some of those, yeah, a bit more informal sort of supports as well, really important. Yeah.
That's amazing. If there was one piece of advice that you could impart to the audience, either about the content of the work you do or how you look after yourself, what would it be?
Mm. I think it's a tricky question. I think one thing that, regardless of what area of social work you're in, one of the things that has been really helpful for me, which I would encourage everyone to do, is to really know yourself deeply. Um, and so I really believe that some of the best therapists have had therapy. You're aware of your own background. Most of us who go into social work, yes, we're passionate about social justice and some of those things, but we've also often have had our own, different experiences of not having needs met, or perhaps even experiencing violence or abuse ourselves, which um, if you go into try and help other people without that awareness of your own triggers and your own what you're bringing into it, that can be really dangerous. And so I think, again, over the years, I've had some really great supervisors, and they've kind of helped me to go, I think this is touching on something else. And I'm like, oh, I think so too. And then, go and have some, private therapy to just kind of explore that more. And yeah, again, it's hard, and it's difficult to do that. But where it leads you to is, place where you're, again, so much more aware,
Mm.
which makes you just such a better therapist and support worker, or whatever your role is, because you feel really comfortable in your own skin. And you know that when you're sitting with a client and you start to notice your nervous system getting activated, you can kind of, in that moment, obviously you can sort of regulate yourself, hopefully you can regulate yourself in that moment, but when that person works out, sort of be able to check in and be like, was that my stuff or their stuff? Like, what came up just then? And kind of just, deal with it, rather than, as you said, pushing things down and getting in a total muddle. So, that would be probably one of the things I'd really like to,
I think that's
impart.
great to highlight the importance of that exploration into knowing yourself, and that's not book learnt. That's not uni smarts. This is the work you do after or during.
Yeah, yeah, definitely, definitely.
Is there something, maybe it overlaps a little bit with that question, but is there something that you wish you knew when you first started studying social work? So you had that interest in social justice, you went
Mm.
straight into social work. What would you have loved to have told little Liz?
Yeah. It's also a really good question. It's a tricky one. Um, I don't know if I'm going to word it right, but it's about sort of, as I said, I came straight from school. I was really idealistic about the level of change that I could um, create, generate. um, and so I think that, and this is probably also because I'm a little bit, have a bit of those perfectionist tendencies. Um, I think I wish I had known. I wish I could tell myself back then that, um, I don't even know how to say it. Like basically that the change that you can create can be, it doesn't have to be on a revolution level. That actually, and this is what part of what I love, the way I think about my work now, which is also another kind of way of fighting that burnout. I'm starting to run some group work online. And so for me, it's like, not only am I teaching my clients about trauma, supporting them to heal and out of their experiences, that's then having an impact on their children. And in the group work experiences, it's decreasing their isolation. And a lot of these women are also becoming advocates of social justice in their circles. So it's kind of these ripple effects, I guess. Whereas I think when I first started, I just wanted to change the world and stuff.
I love that. I feel like I would have loved to have heard that the pressure to feel like it has to be, create an NGO or do some amazing program, and realize each interaction builds connection, builds trust, builds safety. Each person might, we can start to scaffold conversations around, respect and relationships and good health. And each person that does that successfully, that has a ripple effect, and hundreds of those do change the world.
Yes, absolutely.
That's why social workers are amazing.
I know, we're the best, right?
We really are. Totally biased, and yes, 100%. It's been an absolute pleasure talking to you. If any listeners want to find out a bit more about what you offer or where they can find you, what's the best way for them to have a snoop and get in touch?
Yeah, absolutely. So I've got a website, which is breathetherapy.com.au. And I'm on Instagram and Facebook, which is Breathe Therapy Oz, so AUS. Is the handle or whatever. Still learning the social media stuff. But yeah, so you can catch me that way, and just through the website, you can send me an email, get in touch if you have any questions. And likewise, if you're interested in referring anyone for the group work that I offer, I still need to update my website with that, but hopefully by the time this airs, that will be done. And it's all online, so women from all over Australia can potentially join, which is really cool. So yeah, do reach out and get into touch.
Great. And I'll put links to all of those in the show notes for folk. And I've just found you on Instagram, so I'll follow you.
Awesome. Thank you.
Thanks so much for today.
Thank you. It's been a real honor. So thank you so much for your time.
My pleasure. Thank you for listening. I hope you enjoyed today's podcast episode. The Inside Social Work podcast would like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land on which we record this podcast today, and pay our respects to elders past, present and emerging. Thank you for listening. If you would like to support the podcast, you could leave a rating or a review on iTunes or wherever it is you get your podcast, and feel free to join the Facebook group. It'd be great to hear from you. Have a lovely day. Bye.